So hello, thank you for inviting me to talk about digital addiction, a topic that seems to be increasingly discussed or in the news. Um, it's become one of these terms which I think has a lot of different meaning and it's become quite conflated. So hopefully, I'll try and give you a bit of a guide through kind of what's going on in this space. I can't promise I'll give you solutions, but I'll try and suggest some ideas of things that we as a community might want to think about. Sorry, that's wrong. So this is the first headline I remember seeing around what was then called internet addiction. This is from 2010. I'm sure there were headlines previously. I think this is one of the first kind of mainstream headlines. It's interesting as the authors and even as the journalists themselves know, we do stress the point that we're not sure what's causing what. So in this case, they're saying we're not sure is depression causing people to go online more, or is being online more causing people to experience a depression more frequently? And this is the kind of ongoing question, which there's not really a resolution to yet. Kind of what's the relationship between digital device use and their psychological well-being? There's been more recent examples, obviously. This was an example of how people, perhaps because of digital addiction, are drawn to do things and share things they might not possibly be wanting to actually do. This was a case where it was claimed initially that a dolphin calf had died because people had taken it out of the sea to pose for photographs. It is a good example of how we do need to be careful what we see online and if we believe it, because it turned out later on the dolphin calf was already dead. They were just posing with the corpse, which is, I don't want to say better, but it's a different story. But yeah, this idea of it, because people feel this compulsive need potentially to go online to share things, people are doing things which are not, very sensible. Also, people having old tweets and posts coming back to haunt them. This was a case of an England cricket player. And of course, you can't condone people doing things which are antisocial or bad. But, those of us over the age of 30, perhaps, we all did silly things when we were young. The difference was there wasn't anyone recording it. There wasn't a record most of the time somewhere. Nowadays, people post things which you shouldn't post when they're 14, 15, the rest of their life potentially that can follow them. So again, it's that question around kind of judgment and do people really understand? And is the compulsion to be involved in online spaces making them maybe underestimate the potential risk? Also cases of injuries. This is someone who was seriously injured because he was trying to film himself live on Facebook Live and he was driving very fast and crashed his car. There's been other cases where there's been fatalities, people doing things, in cases of people falling off cliff edges because they're trying to take a selfie, with a nice view behind them. So yeah, this idea of people potentially having impaired judgment. What we consider addiction, though, does change. It is quite a fluid space. This is a genuine advert. I did check this one because I thought this could just be some fake news. This is a genuine advert. This was back in the 19th century. If the kids had toothache or just being a bit loud, you could give them some cocaine and that would help distract them. And of course, the point was at the time that people didn't realise how addictive cocaine actually was. You get similar kind of conversation around tobacco companies and nicotine, although skeptics would say, well, the companies knew earlier when they admitted that nicotine was very addictive. But the basic idea is we don't always recognise things as addictive at the time they first appear. It's often a bit later on, with hindsight, we realise that something was actually quite harmful. In terms of diagnostic criteria, so it's a really funny one. Although we talk about digital addiction a lot as if it's a thing, it's not actually particularly well defined in terms of what people can actually be diagnosed with. This is the World Health Organization. They've got the ICD-11, the International Classification of Diseases. It does include gaming disorder as a specific diagnosable condition. People need to have these three features which have to occur over, I think, a 12-month period and cause significant impairment in their life. So impaired control over gaming behaviours, increased priority of gaming to the extent that gaming takes precedence over other life interests and daily activities, and a continuation or escalation of gaming despite the occurrence of negative consequences. And this is kind of a common theme in psychology and well-being. Something becomes an issue when it's causing harm to the self or to others, although even that's quite open to interpretation. The ICD does also include disorders due to addictive behaviours and other specified disorders due to addictive behaviours, so kind of subcategory. which can be applied to digital addiction. So there is space within the ICD for someone to have a diagnosis, although it's again much more kind of fluid and open to interpretation than diagnosis of other things such as gambling. The DSM-5, the revised version, this is the one it's used in America. It's not officially used in Europe, but it is a very influential publication. So even though we don't use it to diagnose in the UK, it's still kind of, kind of impacts on the kind of narrative. People must have 5 out of these list of things, which again, I think has to be for a period of 12 months. So preoccupation, withdrawal symptoms, tolerance. When you look at these criteria, it's quite clear they come from substance use. They've kind of looked at the criteria for diagnosing things like alcoholism or drug use, and have tried to kind of transfer them across to digital addiction, which is maybe a bit debatable. Things like like tolerance, for example, doesn't really quite necessarily fit really well with the idea. Some of them too are a bit questionable. So the use of gaming to relieve negative moods. I mean, isn't that okay? You could question, is that really a problem? It does feel as if there's often a bit of kind of snobbery perhaps around digital device use. There's a sense that somehow people doing things online, it's not as kind of justifiable or as valid as I'm going outside, which adds another level of complication to these things. Prevalence is tricky to determine because there is no kind of, well, it's not even a clear diagnosis or definition within countries. So trying to compare globally how many people could have what we might call digital addiction is very tricky. Been estimated up to about a quarter of the global population might have one subtype of digital addiction. Men, it seems, are more likely to exhibit internet addiction, which again, something which is very kind of broadly defined, and also game addiction. There's also higher prevalence of digital addiction in some low to lower middle income countries, which might seem quite, I suppose, maybe a little bit surprising at kind of first glance, but the kind of idea is that digital devices give you a, relatively speaking, cheap way of accessing entertainment and things. For people who live in rural areas or people who live in places where there's not a great infrastructure, smartphones also just something that's very useful for just banking and financial transactions. It does seem as if there was an increasing trend towards digital addiction during the COVID-19 pandemic, which is maybe not surprising. I remember before the pandemic, I used to get a lot of phone calls from newspapers asking me about, people shouldn't be using devices, people should reduce screen time. And then the pandemic happened, and suddenly everyone was kind of recommending, yep, go on screens, go on Zoom, start teaching everyone online. So there was a bit of mixed messaging. Just in case people are not aware, there's also a thing called esports. As I comment to my students, being a 47-year-old, when I talk to them about technology, I feel like Uncle Bryn from Gavin and Stacey. So I assume people know what these things are already, just in case. So esports, playing video games online, although it started off as people playing on online spaces, it's now got to a point where you get tournaments. So people physically come along to watch people play games online. And in some countries, like South Korea, for example, this is a massive thing. And there's a really good documentary called Free to Play. I think you can get it on Netflix and maybe other platforms, where we tell a story of how to inspire the South Korean national football team for the World Cup, we brought in at the time the highest ranking South Korean esports players. So they were there to inspire the football players. And it's hard to imagine that, being case in other places. We also get concerns, allegations about things like overlap into gambling. So betting in esports has become an issue. But you do get that really mixed messaging. So a lot of places where someone is playing a lot of video games, it seems to be a negative thing. It seems to be a problem, unless they become an esports player and they're making lots of money, in which case it's fine. And you could kind of question, why do you judge someone for playing a lot of video games when they've got the ambition of becoming a very well-paid esports player, but we don't judge someone who is playing football with a view of becoming a Premiership football player? So there's all these kind of double standards, which make it really hard to navigate how we should approach these things. And as mentioned, some work by Agnes Near and Raffaella Rossi, looking at the idea that esports might be encouraging people into gambling behaviours in a way which is maybe not quite on our radar. We tend to recognise this as a potential pathway. We also get things like NFTs that you may have heard of, some non-fungible tokens. This is Bored Ape. This uses kind of blockchain technology, so you basically pay for rights to have a blockchain that is associated with that picture. I mean, big debate, can you really own the picture given that anyone can just copy and paste it? And these are very profitable for a while. Now they've kind of crashed a little bit. And this was just another example of people engaging of kind of online space and online culture in a way which might be more compulsive or more impulsive than perhaps was really ideal. You know, you can wonder people who spent a lot of money on these things, would you do that again if you knew then what we know now? And more recently, also concerns about the idea that things like ChatGPT, other AI platforms can become addictive. This is some work by my colleague Ala at Bournemouth University. So yeah, people might become reliant on these things, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It maybe depends on what advice the AI is giving them. If it's giving supportive advice and someone is using that, and it means they are not having to rely on being on a very long waiting list to get professional help, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Of course, we need to be very, very careful about how exactly that works and does it work. So yes, lots of challenges and questions. I can't promise to give an answer to any of these, but just to raise the kind of things. First of all, is addiction the right term? So it's called digital addiction. But when you say addiction, to me, addiction implies that it's something you can live without. You know, people don't have to drink alcohol to live. They don't have to take cocaine or heroin. It's generally very difficult these days to live without a smartphone or technology. Some people do it, but for a lot of people, it's just be very challenging. And so although it's become a kind of accepted term, I think to me, a better analogy is more healthy eating or moderation. It's not saying people shouldn't use devices, but trying to understand how to do so in a healthy way. It's also used as a bit of a blanket term. And is it really the same? If someone's gambling online, is that the same as someone who is watching 5 hours of TikTok per day? So yeah, is it a single disorder? Is it several? It's still very unclear. Given that you can't kind of yet really be officially diagnosed, it's very hard trying to separate what the different conditions are. As I mentioned, I think there's sometimes a bit of kind of snobbery, a bit of kind of generational attitude. If someone's primarily getting a social contact online, then that's I think still seen to be less proper or less valid than if someone has offline friendships. But it's not necessarily the case. If someone is receiving support online space, that could be just as valuable. Do these things help you have connections you wouldn't otherwise have? So, you know, I can honestly say, having left my undergraduate university 26 years ago, I would not be in contact with my friends now if I had to sit down and physically write a letter to them. But I am still in contact with them because of things like Facebook. So potentially there's a benefit there. Does algorithms and filter bubbles and echo chambers, does it influence social developments? The analogy I always think of, if you imagine raising a child and that child is never told no, but never told you're wrong, imagine the kind of person that child would become. Maybe something similar is happening when it comes to social media platforms. If it's showing you content it thinks you want to see, how is that going to affect how you understand the world? And can you beat digital addiction through a smartphone app? The analogy is often mentioned in relation to this is it's like trying to take an alcoholic to a pub. But actually, for some people, not everyone, but for some people who do have an alcohol problem, that can be a long-term goal. It can be a long-term goal to go to a pub and be okay in that space. So I say I can't give an answer to most of these, but just to raise the kind of things that we're discussing at the moment. Much of my research is on social psychology, so I do like to focus on the social aspects, because although we like to think we're all independent, no matter how independent we are, all of us want to fit in to at least some degree. So some of the work we've done around things like self and peer misperceptions. So I just give you just a question to you. How often do you think you check your phone every day? How long do you spend on it? How much do you think everyone else does? Are you better or worse than everyone else? We did some work with a digital technology company. So with people's permission, obviously, we basically tracked these factors on their phone. We found that people had a mean daily phone use of just over 200 minutes, and they checked their phones 51 times a day. When I first saw that result, I thought that can't be true. And then the next day, I tried to kind of like monitor myself, and I realized it probably was true because a number of times I would just pick up my phone or unlock it without even consciously doing so. I thought, yeah, okay, actually 51 is probably reasonable. People tended to think they spent more time than they actually did. And they also seem to think that we checked it less often. I think probably because looking at your phone is a more conscious, mindful act, where just checking your phone was mostly subconscious. And people also tended to overestimate how much their peers looked at their phone, whilst underestimating how often their peers check their phone. So given we are really influenced by social factors, it's interesting that we seem to have quite a poor ability to actually understand what's happening around us. And this is one of the things that's been used in other behaviours. So if you can give someone a kind of reality check as to what we're doing and what we think everyone else is doing, then that can actually help potentially change that behaviour. There's lots of apps out there that promise to be able to help digital device use. One of our former PhD students had a look at these and basically looked at how much these things match to the research evidence. And the answer was often not very well at all. So we saw these apps using kind of behavior change techniques that as psychologists, we would just say that is never going to work or it's going to make the problem worse. This is a little example. This is 4 apps that we looked at. These are all different behavior change techniques. And although it looks like these apps are using a lot of these, we're using them in a very kind of pick and mix kind of way. There wasn't really any kind of coherence or strategy as to why these combination of different techniques. So yeah, so there are apps out there, but we don't necessarily seem that evidence-based. Also, platform design can be a factor as well. So people get notifications. It's very similar to gambling. You know, you get a random notification, you want to check it, so you're kind of drawn back to it. You get the social validation. You post something, you think it's funny. Your friend gives you a laughing face emoji. We are very basic creatures, humans. No matter how much we like to think, we're not influenced by those things. We are. There's the infinite scroll. It's not like a book. You get to the end of the book, you turn the last page, it's finished. On social media platforms, you can keep on going forever. There's lack of friction. There's nothing really stopping you as such. There's nothing really kind of challenging you. There's also fear of missing out. We are very social creatures. We like to know what's happening in a social world. So if we're not looking at social media, we might get scared we're going to miss something. And also the fact that actually platforms don't really care if you like what they see. What we want you to do is to react to it. And this is why people get content that is deliberately designed to make them angry, because they want people to, comment angrily. Because as long as you're commenting, as long as you're reacting in some way, the advertiser is still getting their money. Yeah, it doesn't actually matter if you like what you're hearing. Of course, recently in Australia, they've tried to ban kids from under 16 using social media. I think the news story there, I think it's someone demonstrating, it's one of the kids showing how she was able to use her mum's driving license to fill the age verification ID. I think there's also a case where there was a certain photograph of Beyonce that the kids discovered would also, if they held up their camera, they would, the system would think, they were an adult. So, potentially a good idea in principle, but hard to actually enforce. And unintended consequences, so some allegations that this technology is stopping kids from accessing news, which is an important thing for them to be able to understand what's happening in the world. So the kind of recommendations, finish off, I'd recommend. So we've got to think about design issues. This is a hard one to do because often companies are driven to sell their products and to make people want to use them. You can shape your own algorithm. If you stop responding to things that make you angry, if you swipe away quite quickly, the algorithm will learn not to show you that content. It takes a while, but you do have power. Context does matter. If you just say we're going to ban everyone from a platform, or we're going to ban any mention of any particular words, you might be blocking people who are using that community in a positive way. People who are in groups that may be discriminated against. There is an increasingly blurred line approach. So we talk about social media, we talk about gaming, gambling, poly markets, cryptocurrency. These things increasingly become overlap with each other. So we can't really just look at one technology in isolation. We've got to try to understand how do all these things come together to potentially impact digital technology. We need more research and discussion on the issue. So perfect segue. I am doing a new handbook. It's called Research Handbook on Digital Addiction. It's a call for chapters. I will send this around the Sprite network as well in the next newsletter. Basically, if you have any interest in doing a chapter on this area, please feel free to contact me. It can be a position paper, it can be a primary data collection paper, it can be a position piece, literature review. So really open to things. So please do get in touch if you're interested. You can contact me on jmclaney@bournemouth.ac.uk. Bournemouth is a lovely place. This is a picture I took of a beach a few months ago. People are always welcome to come and visit us. We're always happy to have a chat about collaboration.